Get up. You're embarrassing me." Nathan Whitmore said it loud enough for 300 people to hear, standing over his 7 months pregnant wife after she'd stumbled and dropped to one knee on the ballroom floor. He didn't reach for her hand. He straightened his cuff and stepped back so the photographers wouldn't catch them in the same frame. That was the night everything changed. Before we go further, please subscribe to the channel and stay with this story all the way to the end. And comment below with the city you're watching from, because I would love to see how far this story travels tonight. The Whitmore Technologies Founders Gala was supposed to be the greatest night of Nathan Whitmore's life, and for the first 2 hours, it was. The ballroom of the Aldrich Hotel on Park Avenue had been rented out entirely, every table dressed in white. Every waiter briefed on which of the 94 guests were investors and which were merely rich. There was a string quartet in the corner playing music nobody listened to. There were cameras from 3 business networks. There was a 40-foot banner behind the stage with Nathan's face on it, 12 feet tall, smiling that particular smile he had practiced in mirrors since he was 24 years old. And there was Claire. Claire Morgan Whitmore stood 4 steps behind her husband in a navy dress that had fit her 3 weeks ago and did not fit her tonight. Her feet had swollen sometime around 6 p.m. Her back had started aching sometime around 7. It was now 10:15, and she had been standing mostly on her feet for nearly 4 hours because Nathan had explained in the car that sitting made a pregnant woman look tired, and tired was not the story they were telling tonight. "You're not tired," he'd said, adjusting his tie in the reflection of the tinted window. "You're radiant. Say it back to me. Nathan, say it back." "I'm radiant," she said. "There she is." She had laughed then. That was the part that would haunt her later in the quiet years afterward, when she went back over the night in her mind, the way you press a bruise to see if it still hurts. She had laughed. She had let him say a thing like that to her, and she had laughed because that was what she'd been doing for 6 years, and she'd gotten so good at it that her body did it before her brain could object. A woman named Diane Kessler ran Nathan's public relations, and Diane had a phrase for what Claire was supposed to be that night. She'd said it out loud at the strategy meeting on Tuesday without any apparent awareness that Claire was sitting in the room. "She's the softening element," Diane said. "Colvin's people don't invest in wolves. They invest in family men who happen to be wolves, so the wife's the softening element." "That's my wife you're talking about," Nathan said, and for one warm second, Claire had felt something like hope. "That's the asset," Diane said. "Sorry, that's the asset you're married to." And Nathan had laughed. He'd laughed the same way she did. That was the thing about Nathan Whitmore that nobody outside the marriage ever understood. He wasn't a monster in the movie sense. He didn't shout at her in restaurants or throw things. He laughed when someone called his pregnant wife an asset because he genuinely could not locate anywhere in his body the muscle that would have made him stop laughing. At 10:15, Nathan took the stage. He was good. He was always good. He talked about starting the company out of a rented room in Long Island City with 2 laptops and a space heater. He talked about the 18 months when he ate cereal for dinner. He talked about the investors who told him no and the ones who said yes, and he thanked each one by name, and the room applauded in all the correct places. Then he said, "And none of it happens without one person." Claire's stomach dropped because she knew this part. 6 years ago, I met a woman who believed in me when the only thing I owned was a bad haircut and a business plan. Warm laughter. "Claire, come up here." She hadn't been told about this. That was the first crack. Small hairline almost invisible. Nathan planned everything. Nathan planned what she wore and what she said. And when she'd smile, and he had not told her she'd be walking up 11 carpeted stairs in front of 300 people at 10:15 at night in a body that had stopped being fully hers around month 5, which meant it wasn't a plan. It meant it was improvisation, and Nathan improvised only when he was winning. And when Nathan was winning, he stopped seeing her entirely. She went anyway. She got 7 steps up and her heel caught the lip of the carpet runner, and her balance, which had been a stranger to her since April, simply left. She didn't fall far. That mattered later when people described it. She went down onto one knee hard, and her hand slapped the stair, and the whole room made that sound a crowd makes that single shared intake of breath, 300 lungs pulling at once. And a man at table 9, a portfolio manager named Sam Ferreira, was already halfway out of his chair to help her. Nathan got there first. He got there first and he did not put out his hand. He stood over her, and his face did something that maybe 11 people in that room actually saw because it lasted less than a second before the smile came back. It was disgust. Not concern rearranged into disgust. Just disgust arriving pure and immediate the way a reflex arrives. "Get up," he said. "You're embarrassing me." Somebody's fork hit a plate. Claire looked up at her husband from one knee on the stairs with her hand under her belly and her ears roaring, and she said quietly, "Nathan, help me up." "Claire, I need your hand." "You're fine," he said. And then to the room with a laugh, "She's fine, everybody. Pregnancy, right? 2 more months of this." Nobody laughed. That was the second crack, and this one Claire actually heard like ice going on a lake. 300 people, and not one of them laughed. Nathan Whitmore had spent 20 years learning to read a room, and in that moment, the room went somewhere he could not follow, and instead of understanding it, instead of dropping to his knees beside his wife and letting it be the most human thing anyone saw all year, he got angry. She saw it land in him. She saw him decide the problem was her. Sam Ferreira reached her before her husband did. He was 61 years old, he had a bad shoulder, and he still got down on the stairs and put his forearm under hers and said, "Easy, easy now. I've got you. Any pain? Look at me. Any pain?" "I'm okay," Claire said. "You look at me and you tell me the truth." "I'm okay," she said again, and her voice broke on the second word, and Sam Ferreira, who had come to that gala to decide whether to put $90 million into Whitmore Technologies, heard it break. He heard it break, and he looked up at Nathan. Nathan was checking the cameras. That's what he was doing. His wife was being helped off the floor by a stranger, and Nathan Whitmore had turned his head to see whether the networks had gotten it, and when he saw that they had, he did the thing that ended him. He didn't know it ended him. He thought he was saving it. He put his hand on Claire's back, mid-stumble, and steered her the rest of the way up the stairs, and to the microphone he said, laughing, "Ladies and gentlemen, my wife, Grace personified." The applause was a scattering of noise. It died in about 4 seconds. Claire stood beside him under the lights, with her knee throbbing and her heart going like a bird in a box, and Nathan leaned into the microphone and said the second thing, the thing she would repeat later word for word in a room with lawyers in it. "I tell people all the time," he said, "behind every successful man is a woman asking how much longer this is going to take." Pause for a laugh that did not come. 6 years she's been asking. 6 years I've been saying just a little longer, honey, and tonight, he opened his arms to the banner to his own enormous face. "Tonight I get to say it's done. Look at it. Look what we built. We." He said we and Claire understood standing there in front of every person whose opinion Nathan had ever cared about that he did not mean her. He meant the company. He meant the men at tables 1 through 4. She was the woman asking how much longer she was the one holding him back. She was the punchline in the story of his own triumph, and he had said it into a live microphone while she stood there carrying his son. Something in Claire Morgan went very, very quiet. Not broke. People always said afterward that something in her broke that night and they were wrong, and she corrected them every time she heard it. Nothing broke. Something got quiet. Something that had been talking for 6 years, explaining and excusing and translating him into a language she could live with, just stopped talking. She put her hand flat on her belly, and she thought with total clarity, "You are never going to hear him talk to me like that. Not once. Not one time in your whole life." She did not cry. She turned to the microphone and she said, "Thank you all for coming." And her voice came out even and warm and completely ordinary, and she walked off the stage on her own down 11 steps without touching the rail. The room watched her go. Nathan kept talking. He talked for another 9 minutes. He was again very good, and it did not matter at all because every person in that ballroom was doing the same arithmetic, and the arithmetic went he wouldn't give her his hand. Claire made it to the corridor outside the ballroom before her legs started shaking. She got to the ladies' lounge and sat on the little velvet bench and put her face in her hands and did not cry, and a woman she'd never met came in and stopped. "Honey, I'm fine." "You're not," the woman said. She was maybe 70. She sat down. She smelled like gardenias and hairspray, and she had a diamond on her hand the size of a chickpea. "I'm Maureen. I've been coming to these things for 41 years. "Claire, I know who you are." Maureen took a breath. My husband did that to me. In 1989, not in front of 300 people. He wasn't that stupid, but he did it. And I want to tell you what I did about it because I have thought about it every single day since. Claire lifted her head. Nothing, Maureen said. I did nothing. I told myself he was under pressure. I told myself the baby needed a father. I told myself 100 beautiful, reasonable things, and I was married to that man for 32 more years, and he never once in 32 years apologized for it. Because why would he? I taught him he didn't have to. Claire's mouth was dry. He's not always. I know he's not always, Maureen said gently. Mine wasn't always either. That's what makes it work, sweetheart. If they were always, we'd all leave in a week. They sat there. The music came through the wall, muffled and stupid. He's under a lot of stress, Claire said. There's a deal. It's the biggest thing he's ever. Claire. What? He looked at the cameras, Maureen said. You were on the floor and he looked at the cameras. I saw it. Sam Ferreira saw it. That whole room saw it. She put her hand over Claire's. Men show you who they are in the half second before they remember to perform. You just got a half second. Most of us wait 30 years for one. Claire sat very still. What did you do? She asked. After, in 1989. I've told you, nothing. No, Claire said. What did you want to do? And Maureen smiled, and it was not a nice smile at all. I wanted to let him finish building it, she said. The whole thing, every floor. And then I wanted to be standing there on the day he found out what it was sitting on. Claire didn't answer, but her hands had stopped shaking. She found Nathan 40 minutes later at the bar with Diane Kessler and a man from Colvin Partners named Alec Reyes. Nathan saw her coming and his face did a thing it had never done before, and it took Claire a moment to identify it because she had never seen it on him. He was scared. There she is, Nathan said. Everybody my wife who I love, who is fine, who took a spill and is fine. Nathan, Alec Reyes said, give it a rest. I'm just saying. Mrs. Whitmore, Reyes said, turning fully away from Nathan, which was in that world roughly equivalent to slapping him. Are you all right? Do you need a doctor? I can have a car here in 90 seconds. I'm fine, Mr. Reyes. Thank you. You're sure? I'm sure. Reyes looked at her for a long moment. He was maybe 50 silver at the temples, and he had a daughter, though Claire didn't know that yet. Well, he said, it's a hell of a party, Nathan. And he left. The silence he left behind had a shape to it. Diane Kessler said brightly, Okay, so that's fixable. What's fixable? Nathan said. That. Diane gestured vaguely at the entire ballroom. The optics. We get a shot of the two of you leaving hand in hand. He's got his coat around her. We leak it to the Post tomorrow with a line about how he never left her side. He didn't leave my side, Claire said. Diane blinked. Right, exactly. He never got to my side, Claire said. There was nothing to leave. Nathan turned to her with his glass halfway to his mouth. Don't do this here. I'm not doing anything. You are doing the voice. What voice, Nathan? The quiet voice, he snapped. The martyr voice. The one where you don't say anything, and somehow I'm the... He stopped. He'd raised it. Two people at the bar had turned. He set his glass down very carefully and smiled at them and lowered his volume to something intimate and terrible. You fell, he said, on my stage, on the biggest night of my life, in front of Colvin. Do you have any idea what that costs me? Claire looked at her husband. Say that again, she said. What? The last part. Say it again. Claire, you said what that costs me, she said. I want you to hear yourself say it twice. I think that's fair. I think a person should get to hear a thing twice before they decide what it was. Nathan's jaw moved. I'm not doing this here, he said. No, Claire agreed. You're not. They rode home in silence for 11 blocks. Then Nathan said, I overreacted. Claire watched the city go by. There. Okay, I overreacted. I've been up since 4:30. Reyes has been sitting on this term sheet for 6 weeks, and tonight was the night, and I had 11 things going in my head at once, and you went down, and I panicked. You panicked? Yes. You panicked, Claire said, and the panic came out as you're embarrassing me. That's not fair. Nathan, when I fell, do you know what I thought about? For the whole second and a half I was going down. She turned to look at him. I thought about the baby. That was it. That was my whole entire brain. The baby. And then I looked up and I found out what your whole entire brain was. Don't. I'm not angry, she said. And the strangest part was that it was true. I want you to understand that. I'm not yelling. I'm not going to make a scene. I just found something out and I'm sitting with it. Found what out? Claire didn't answer. Found what out, Claire? That you didn't hesitate, she said. The car went another 4 blocks. I'll fix it, Nathan said. Tomorrow, I'll do a thing. Diane can put out a statement. And Claire started laughing. It scared him. She could see it scaring him in the reflection. She laughed until she had to hold her belly, and it wasn't hysterical, it was just genuinely, helplessly funny that his response to you did not hesitate was, Diane can put out a statement. What? Nathan said. What? Nothing, Claire said, wiping her eyes. Nothing. You're right. Have Diane put out a statement. They got home at midnight, and she went upstairs and he went into his study and shut the door, and Claire stood in the dark hallway of their brownstone with her hand on the newel post and listened to her husband make a phone call. The study door was oak. It was thick. But the vent in the hallway ran straight down from his ceiling to the guest room, and Claire had known that for 2 years, and she had never once used it, because she had been a wife who did not do that. She went into the guest room and sat on the floor next to the vent. She was still in the navy dress. No, it's handled, Nathan was saying. Diane's on it. Reyes is a Boy Scout. He'll come around. Because there's nothing to come around from Cy, she tripped. I said a thing. It's a Tuesday. Pause. Yeah, well, the character clause is the character clause. That's why it's in there. That's why we agreed to it. Longer pause. No, listen to me. After close. Not before. You don't touch it before. Claire's hand was flat on the carpet. Because, Nathan said, and he sounded tired and reasonable, and it was the reasonableness that Claire would remember for the rest of her life. If I do it before close Colvin walks. The clause is about stability. You know what reads as unstable filing while your wife is 8 months pregnant. A laugh. I know. I'm not a monster. Cy, I'm on a timeline. Claire did not move. Q1, Nathan said. The money's wired, the lockup's done, the kid's born, everybody's had a nice Christmas, and then in January we sit down like adults, and I make her a very generous... Pause. No, she'll take it. She's not Cy, you don't know her. She's not like that. She's not a fighter. She's the most agreeable person I've ever met in my life. Something in the vent whined faintly. Claire had leaned into it. That's why I married her, Nathan said. And then a second later, quieter, almost fond, look, her family's nothing. Dad's a retired accountant out in Connecticut or something, drives a Buick. There's nobody to call. That's not cruelty, that's just math. She's got a friend who's a lawyer, that's the only real exposure, and Rachel Bennett does contracts, she's not going to war with me. A pause. Right, okay, so Q1, not a day before. Go to bed, Cy. The call ended. Claire sat on the floor of the guest room in a navy dress that didn't fit at 12:20 in the morning with her son turning over inside her, and she did not cry, and she did not scream, and she did not get up. She just sat there and let it finish arriving. Because it was arriving in pieces, and each piece was worse than the last. After close. That was the first piece. He was going to leave her, and he'd known it long enough to have a quarter picked out. That was the second piece. The kid's born, everybody's had a nice Christmas. Her son had a slot in a timeline. That was the third. But the fourth piece was the one that changed everything, and Claire understood sitting there that the fourth piece was the only one that mattered. Her family's nothing. There's nobody to call. Claire Morgan pressed both hands over her mouth, and what came out was not a sob. It was a laugh. She had hidden it for 6 years. She had done it so well and for so long that she'd almost let herself forget it was a decision. When she was 24 and she'd met a broke, brilliant, hungry man at a bar in Long Island City who talked to her for 4 hours about a business plan without once asking what her father did, she had made a choice, and she had made it on purpose, and she had kept it every single day since. She'd used her mother's maiden name at work. She told him her father was retired, which was technically narrowly lawyer-approvingly true. She'd let Nathan pay for a wedding he couldn't afford because he'd wanted to, and she had watched him hand over that check with so much pride in his face that she'd nearly told him the truth right there at the table. She hadn't, because she'd wanted one time in her life to be loved by someone who didn't know. And she'd gotten her wish. God, she had gotten exactly her wish. Dad's a retired accountant out in Connecticut, drives a Buick. He did drive a Buick. That part was true. Edward Morgan had driven the same 2009 Buick for 17 years because he said a man who needs a car to tell people who he is has already told them. The rest of it was not true. The rest of it was that Edward Morgan had founded Morgan Capital Group out of a 2-room office in 1981 with borrowed money and had spent 44 years turning it into one of the largest privately held investment firms in the United States. That he sat on nothing and appeared in nothing and gave interviews to no one. And that if you were a man raising $1 billion round in the technology sector in the city of New York, the odds that some part of that money touched Edward Morgan's hands on its way to you were not small. They were, in fact, in Nathan Whitmore's specific case, 100%. Claire didn't know that yet. That was still 11 days away. What she knew sitting on the guest room floor at 12:22 in the morning was one simple thing, and it went through her like a current. He thinks there's nobody to call. She got up. Her knees screamed. She ignored it. She walked to the window and looked out at the street, and she thought about Maureen in the ladies' lounge saying, "I wanted to let him finish building it," and she thought about Sam Ferreira's forearm under hers, and she thought about her husband's face in the half-second before he remembered to perform. Then she took out her phone and she called Rachel Bennett. It rang 4 times. "Do you know what time it is?" Rachel said. "Rach?" Rachel Bennett had known Claire Morgan since they were 19 years old, and she heard something in that one syllable that had her sitting up in the dark in her apartment on West 11th. "Where are you?" Rachel said. "Home." "Is he there?" "He's downstairs." "Are you safe?" "Yes," Claire said. "Rachel, I need to ask you something, and I need you to answer me like a lawyer and not like my friend." "Okay." "If a man's investment deal has a character clause in it," Claire said, "and that man has been recorded in a room with 300 witnesses and 3 television cameras telling his pregnant wife that she's embarrassing him." She stopped, steadied. "And if that same man has been telling people for months that he intends to file the day the money clears—" Rachel didn't say anything. "How much trouble is he in?" Claire said. The line was quiet for a long moment. "Claire," Rachel said carefully, "are you asking me a hypothetical?" "No." "Are you asking me whether you should leave him?" "No," Claire said. And her voice when it came was so calm that Rachel Bennett would tell people about it for the next 20 years. "I'm asking you how long it takes," Claire said, "to find out what he actually signed." 4 days, Rachel said. "Maybe 5. Claire, listen to me. Don't say another word on this phone." "Why?" "Because it's on his family plan," Rachel said, "and I've watched that man read his own board's texts over their shoulders on an elevator. Go to bed. Be normal. Be so normal it hurts. I'll be at your door at 7. Claire hung up and stood in the dark for a while, and then she did something she would think about later with a kind of cold admiration for herself. She took off the navy dress. She hung it up. She put on the robe Nathan had bought her in Positano, the one he always said made her look like a woman in a movie, and she walked downstairs and she opened the study door and she said, "Come to bed." Nathan looked up from his laptop like a man who'd been braced for a war and handed a sandwich. "Yeah," he said. "It's late," Claire said. "Come to bed." And he did. He came upstairs and he got in beside her, and after 11 minutes he said into the dark, "I really am sorry." "I know," Claire said. "I love you." "I know," Claire said, and she lay there with her eyes open until 4:15 in the morning, listening to her husband breathe, thinking about the word timeline. Rachel Bennett came at 7 with 2 coffees and a face like a closed door. Nathan had already left. He'd left at 5:40 because Alec Reyes had a 6:30 flight, and Nathan had decided somewhere in the night that a personal appearance at Teterboro would fix it, and Claire had watched him tie his shoes with tremendous energy and thought he still doesn't know what happened last night. "Okay," Rachel said, sitting at the kitchen island. "Tell me all of it. Start where you fell." "I didn't fall. I went down on one knee." "Fine." "It matters," Claire said. "It matters because if I'd fallen, if I'd been on my back, if there'd been blood, he'd have helped me. I think. I've been up all night deciding whether I think that, and I think I do." Rachel put her coffee down. "Claire, I need to be fair to him. You need to be fair to him. Yes, Claire said, and her voice did something, then cracked and reformed in the space of a breath. Because if I'm not fair to him, then this is revenge. And I'm not going to spend the rest of my life explaining to my son that his mother did something out of revenge. So we're going to be scrupulous, Rachel. We're going to be so scrupulous, it's boring. Everything I say from now on has to be true, and I have to be able to prove every word of it, and if at any point I can't, we stop. Rachel looked at her for a long moment. 6 years, she said. 6 years I've been waiting for you to talk like that. Don't. I'm a loud one, Rachel said. 1, that's it, and then I'm your lawyer. She opened her bag. Now tell me about the vent, Claire told her. All of it. Word for word, because Claire Morgan had the kind of memory that had made her the best editor at her magazine before she'd quietly let that go too. And when she got to her family's, nothing, there's nobody to call. Rachel Bennett stopped writing. Her pen just stopped. Say that again, Rachel said. He said there's nobody to call. He said your father's a retired accountant. With a Buick. Rachel sat back on the stool. She put both hands flat on the counter, and then she laughed once, a short, shocked bark of a thing, and said, Claire, honey, does he genuinely not? He genuinely doesn't. In 6 years. He never asked, Claire said. That's not a figure of speech, Rachel. He has never asked. He met my father 4 times. 4. Twice at the wedding, once at Thanksgiving, once at the hospital when Mom, and every single time, my dad asked him 9 questions, and Nathan answered all 9, and never asked one back. Not one. And afterward in the car, Nathan would say your dad's a sweet guy, and I'd say yeah, and that was it. That was the whole relationship. 6 years. Your father, Rachel said slowly, who runs one of the largest private investment yes, and Nathan Whitmore, who raises money for a living, yes, has been sitting across a Thanksgiving table from him 4 times and never asked him a single question about money. Not one, Claire said. Rachel put her face in her hands. That's the most damning thing I've ever heard in my life. It's not damning, Claire said. It's worse. It's incurious. Rachel, he doesn't hate my father. He doesn't think about my father. My father takes up exactly as much space in Nathan's head as the guy who does the windows. And Rachel Bennett, who had spent 19 years reading contracts written by men, said, that's how it always is. They don't beat you. They just don't look at you. And one day they look up, and they've got a hole in the middle of their life, and they can't figure out where it came from. Claire didn't answer. I need the term sheet, Rachel said. I don't have it. You have a study with a door that isn't locked. Claire looked at her. No. Claire. No, Claire said. Absolutely not. Do you know what he'd do with that? Do you know how fast this stops being about what he did to me and starts being about what I did to him? He'd have a story. He'd have his story back. Diane would have it in the Post by Thursday, unstable wife rifles through husband's office. She shook her head. I'm not giving him a story. He gets nothing from me, not one thing he can use. Then what do you want me to do? I want you to find it somewhere else, Claire said. It exists in more than one building. Rachel stared at her. You're really good at this, she said. That's unsettling. I've been married to him for 6 years, Claire said. I've been in the room for every negotiation he's ever had. I used to bring him coffee at 2 a.m. and he'd talk out loud while he worked because he liked an audience. Rachel, I know how he thinks better than his own board does. Her hand went to her belly absently the way it did now 100 times a day. That's the part he never priced in. He kept me close because I was decoration, and decoration hears everything. The Colvin Partners term sheet took Rachel Bennett 6 days, not 4. It took 6 days because she didn't go get it. She never touched it. What she did instead was the thing lawyers do that never makes it into movies, which is that she made 11 phone calls to people she'd gone to law school with and did 9 favors and called in 4. And on the 6th day, a woman named Priya Raman, who was outside counsel to a fund that was a limited partner in a fund that was co-investing in the round, said the following sentence over a salad in Bryant Park. I can't show you anything, but I can tell you that if you're asking about Clause 14, you're asking about the right clause. 14, Rachel said. I didn't say that. What's the trigger? Priya ate some salad. Hypothetically, in deals structured like this one, and I have no idea how this one's structured, a founder-dependent round with a 9-figure check and a lockup will sometimes carry a representation. The founder reps that there's no pending or contemplated event that would materially alter the public perception of his personal conduct or the stability of his household, hypothetically. Rachel set down her fork. Contemplated, she said, hypothetically. Not pending, contemplated. Rachel, Priya said, I really do have to get back. Priya, who wrote 14? And Priya Raman, halfway out of her chair, stopped. She sat back down. That's a strange question, she said. Is it? Because it's not a Colvin clause, Priya said. I'll tell you that much for free and then I'm leaving. Colvin doesn't write character reps. Colvin thinks character reps are unenforceable and embarrassing. That language came in from an LP. It came in late, it came in as a condition, and it came in from somebody big enough that Colvin took it into the dock without a fight, which is not a thing that happens to Colvin. She stood. Somebody wanted that clause in there, Rachel. Somebody made it the price of the money. Who? I don't know, Priya said. And I mean that. It's papered through 2 funds. But I'll tell you what I told my associate when I read it because I read it twice, and it stuck with me. She put on her sunglasses. It doesn't read like a lawyer wrote it. It reads like somebody's father wrote it. Rachel Bennett sat in Bryant Park for 11 minutes after she left. Then she called Claire and said 4 words. Where is your dad? Claire went to Connecticut on a Saturday alone and told Nathan she was seeing her mother's sister, and Nathan said, sure, take the car, without looking up from his phone, and that was the entire conversation. And Claire drove 90 minutes north, thinking about how the last honest conversation of her marriage had lasted 6 seconds and been about a car. Edward Morgan was 71 years old. He was in the garage when she pulled in doing something unnecessary to a lawnmower. He paid a man to service twice a year, and when he saw the shape of his daughter getting out of the car, he put down the wrench and wiped his hands on a rag and said, Well, hi, Dad. You're big. I'm enormous. You're beautiful, Edward Morgan said. You're also enormous. Both things are allowed to be true. And then he looked at her face, and everything about him changed, and he said quietly, Come inside. She got about 4 sentences in before she stopped being able to talk. She'd planned it in the car. She'd planned it the whole way up 95, a calm chronological summary, gala stairs, microphone, vent, timeline. And she got as far as he said, Get up, you're embarrassing me. And then her throat closed, and she sat at her father's kitchen table, 32 years old, 7 months pregnant, and cried like she was 9. Edward Morgan did not say anything. He got up. He put this kettle on because that was what he'd done when her mother died, and it was what he did now, and he stood at the counter with his back to her so she could do it privately, which was the single kindest thing anyone had done for Claire Morgan in 6 years. And when she was finished, he brought her tea she didn't want and sat down across from her. Now, he said, from the beginning, and don't protect him. It took 40 minutes. When she got to the phone call to her family's nothing. There's nobody to call. Dad's a retired accountant, drives a Buick. Edward Morgan's hands, which had been folded on the table the entire time, did not move. Nothing about him moved. Claire had seen her father angry exactly twice in her life, and both times it had looked like this. Like a room where the temperature dropped 4 degrees and nobody could say why. Say the last part again, he said. Dad, the Buick part. Dad, don't. I'm not doing anything, Edward Morgan said. I'm listening to my daughter. That's all I've done since you were born, and it's all I'm doing now. Say it again. He said her family's nothing. There's nobody to call. The kettle ticked as it cooled. Claire, her father said, I want to ask you something, and I want you to understand that whatever you answer, I'll do it. And I won't ask twice, and I'll never bring it up again as long as I live. Okay. Do you want me to do nothing? Claire looked up. Because I will, Edward Morgan said. You've spent 6 years keeping me out of it, and I've respected that every single day, and it cost me more than, you know. You want to walk away from him quietly with a settlement and never see me lift a finger. I'll sit right here in this kitchen and I'll fix a lawnmower that doesn't need fixing, and I will never say his name again. That's on the table. That's genuinely on the table. So I'm asking, Claire didn't answer for a long time. "You'd really do that," she said. "Sweetheart." Her father said, "I've been doing it for 6 years." And that was the sentence that broke her more than the stairs, more than the vent. Because she understood sitting in her father's kitchen that he had known, not the specifics, but he had known something was wrong, and he had watched it 4 Thanksgivings and a wedding and a hospital waiting room, and he had said nothing because his daughter had asked him for one thing in her whole life, and the one thing was, "Let me do this myself." "How long have you known?" she said. "Since the wedding." "Dad, he gave a 9-minute toast," Edward Morgan said, "at his own wedding, and he said your name 4 times, and he said I 41 times. I counted. I sat there with your mother's chair empty next to me, and I counted." He turned his cup a quarter turn. "And then I went home, and I told myself I was a bitter old man who didn't want to lose his daughter, and I decided I'd rather be wrong and have you than be right and have a grudge. So I shut up. For 6 years I shut up." He looked at her. "That's the worst thing I've ever done. I want you to know that. In 44 years of business, I have done some hard things, and the worst one was sitting at a table with that boy and passing him the potatoes." Claire put her hand over her father's hand, and then she said, "Dad, there's a clause." Edward Morgan didn't move. "In his round," Claire said. "Rachel found it. There's a character clause, and nobody can figure out where it came from, and Colvin doesn't write character clauses, and it came in from a limited partner, late, as a condition." Her father was extremely still. "Rachel's friend read it," Claire said, "and she said, and I'm quoting her exactly, she said it doesn't read like a lawyer wrote it. It reads like somebody's father wrote it." The clock on the wall went on, doing what clocks do. "Dad," Claire said. "Yeah." "Look at me." Edward Morgan looked at his daughter. "Did you write clause 14? She said. And her father, who had never once lied to her, said yes. Claire's ears rang. 19 months ago. Edward Morgan said, "A man named Cy Feldman came to a fund I'm in and asked for money for a rising technology company in New York. And I read the deck like I read 400 decks a year, and I got to page 11, and there was a photograph of the founder and his wife at a ribbon cutting." He stopped, started again. "And it was you. It was my daughter on page 11 of a pitch deck, and nobody in that room knew because you'd asked me and I'd promised. And I sat there in a conference room and looked at a picture of my own child and said, the market's interesting, send it to committee. Cheta! Tase. Oh my God! So I went home," Edward Morgan said, "and I did the only thing I could think of that wasn't breaking my word to you. I didn't block him. I want you to hear that. I never blocked him, not once, not $1. I could have. It would have taken one phone call, and he'd have never known why, and he'd have gone to his grave thinking the market turned on him." He shook his head slowly. "But that's not a test. That's just me deciding. So instead I put in a clause." "Dad?" "It's a door, Claire. That's all it is. It's a door with a sign on it that says don't. Any decent man walks past a door like that his whole life and never notices it's there. It doesn't cost him a thing. It only exists if you open it." He looked up. "I gave him 19 months of rope and a written warning he signed with his own hand, and I let it be up to him. That's the fairest thing I know how to do. And I'll tell you what I told your mother's photograph the night I wrote it. I said, if he's good, he'll never know this happened. And if he's not, he'll find out what he agreed to." Claire was crying again. She hated it. She couldn't stop. "Say the words," Edward Morgan said quietly. "The ones he said in the study. Dad, say them." "Her family's nothing," Claire whispered. "There's nobody to call." And Edward Morgan closed his eyes. 19 months, he said. "That boy has been spending my money." "Don't," Claire said. "Dad, don't. Not for me. I don't want Claire. I don't want to be the woman whose daddy fixed it." It came out of her at a volume that surprised them both. "Don't you understand? That's exactly what he thinks I am. He thinks I'm decoration. He thinks I'm agreeable. He thinks I'm the softening element. And if you walk in there and blow him up, then he gets to spend the rest of his life telling people at parties that he was destroyed by his wife's rich father, and I will have proved him right. I'll have proved him right forever. He'll never have to look at what he did on those stairs. Not once. You'll have given him somewhere else to look. Da mi ma somebody. Edward Morgan sat back. Well, he said. So no, Claire said. No, I'm not letting you save me. Okay? Okay? Okay, her father said. Then what do you want? And Claire Morgan wiped her face with the heel of her hand and said, I want him to do it himself. The kitchen was very quiet. Explain, Edward Morgan said. He's got a comeback event, Claire said. Diane's already building it. 2 weeks out, the Whitmore Foundation thing, 500 people, the whole board, Colvin all 3 networks. It's a rehabilitation. It's an apology tour with a step and repeat. And do you know what the centerpiece is, Dad? Do you know what the actual centerpiece of the evening is? You. Me, Claire said. He wants me on that stage. He wants me on that stage in a beautiful dress with his hand on my back telling 500 people that my husband is a good man who had a bad night. Her jaw set. He's going to hand me a microphone, Dad. In front of everyone he's ever wanted to impress, he's going to hand me a microphone because it has never crossed his mind, not once in 6 years, that I might use it. Edward Morgan stared at his daughter. And then he did something Claire hadn't seen him do since before her mother got sick. He smiled. Your mother, he said, would have liked that very much. I need it to be clean, Claire said. Everything I say has to be true and provable. No stolen documents, nothing off his laptop, nothing that isn't mine. Then it can't be the term sheet, Edward Morgan said. That's not yours. You put a stolen term sheet on a screen, you're a thief, and he's a victim, and the story's over in one news cycle. I know. So what do you have? I have what he said to me in front of 300 people, Claire said, which is on 3 networks. I have what he said to me in a car, which is nothing. And I have what he said on the phone in his study, which is a wife in her own house, Edward Morgan said, in a state that requires one party to consent sitting in her own guest room, hearing her own husband's voice through her own vent in a house she is on the deed of. Claire looked at him. You know this, she said slowly. Claire, her father said, I've been in business for 44 years. Everybody knows this. Was I recording? I have no idea, Edward Morgan said, and picked up his tea. Were you? Claire didn't answer. And Edward Morgan didn't ask again. They sat there in the kitchen, and after a while her father said, There's a problem with your plan. What? Your plan requires you to stand on a stage for 11 days first, he said, smiling, next to him, letting him touch you, letting him say my wife to a room. 11 days of being the softening element, Claire, when you know exactly what he is. He put down his cup. That's the hardest thing you'll ever do. That's harder than the stage. I've seen grown men, hard men come apart doing 4 days of that. I know. Do you? Dad, Claire said. I've done 6 years of it. Edward Morgan was quiet for a moment. Yeah, he said. I suppose you have. She got up to go. She'd been there 90 minutes. Nathan wouldn't be home until 8, and she'd be back by 6, and he wouldn't ask, and both of them knew he wouldn't ask, and that was the whole marriage in a sentence. At the door, her father said, Claire. She turned. When you're up there, Edward Morgan said, don't be angry. Anger's a gift, sweetheart. You give a man like that your anger, he'll spend it. He'll take it into a room with his PR woman and turn it into a story about a hormonal wife having an episode, and by Thursday, you'll be the villain of your own life. He was leaning on the doorframe. Be calm. Be so calm it scares them. Say true things in a normal voice. That's it. That's the whole thing. A man like Nathan can survive a screaming woman. He cannot survive a calm one. Okay? And Claire. Yeah, Dad. Edward Morgan looked at his daughter for a long moment. Don't call me, he said. Not that night. Don't look for me. Don't save me a seat. Don't tell Rachel to tell me when it starts. You do it yourself exactly like you said. It's yours. Claire nodded, and her eyes were wet, and she said, Thank you. And her father said, But if that boy takes that microphone out of your hand... He stopped. Dad, I'm just saying, Edward Morgan said mildly, that I do own a suit. Claire drove home. She got in at 5:50. Nathan got in at 8:20, and he was electric. He was lit up. He came through the door, already talking, and he crossed the kitchen and kissed her on the forehead for the first time in 9 weeks. It's back, he said. Claire, it's back. Reyes called. We're closing. Second week of January, wire clears. It's done. It's done. It's actually done. That's wonderful, Claire said. And Diane's got the foundation thing locked. 5th of December, 500 people, all 3 networks. He was pouring a drink, moving he couldn't hold still. And listen, this is the good part. This is the part you're going to love. I'm putting you up there. Claire went very still. Not a speech, Nathan said. Nothing scary. I know you hate that. Just 2 minutes. Just you and me. You say something about the foundation, about the baby, about, us. He turned around with the glass in his hand, and he was glowing. He was so pleased with himself, he had never in his life looked more like the man she'd met in a bar in Long Island City. It kills the whole story dead. Reyes sees it, the board sees it, the networks see it, and the gala's gone. It never happened. Claire looked at her husband. You want me to speak? She said. 2 minutes, 3, whatever. On the stage? Yeah. With a microphone, Claire said. Baby. Nathan said, laughing. It's not a hostage situation, it's 2 minutes. You'll be great. You're always great. That's the whole point of you. He heard it. For 1 single second, Nathan Whitmore heard the thing that came out of his own mouth, and something crossed his face, and Claire watched it cross, and she watched him decide it was fine. You know what I mean? He said. And Claire Morgan smiled at her husband and put her hand on her belly and said in the warmest, most agreeable voice she owned, Of course I do, Nathan. 2 minutes, 11 days. That was the number Claire Morgan carried around in her chest like a stone, and it was worse than she'd expected, and she had expected it to be bad. Day 1 was easy, because on day 1, Nathan was still so happy about Reyes that he didn't need anything from her. Day 2, he brought home a dress in a garment bag and hung it on the closet door and said cream. Diane says cream reads as forgiveness. And Claire said, that's nice, and went and stood in the bathroom with the water running for 4 minutes. Day 3, Diane Kessler emailed her the speech. Diane. It was 640 words. It had been written for her by a woman who had called her an asset in a conference room, and it was, Claire had to admit, extremely good. It talked about the foundation. It talked about the baby. It had a joke about swollen ankles that landed. And in the 4th paragraph it said, Nathan and I have been through the fire together, and I want you all to know that the man you read about last month is not the man I go home to. Claire read that sentence 11 times. Then she wrote back, This is beautiful, Diane. Thank you for taking the time. And Diane wrote back, Learn it cold. He'll want it word for word. Day 4. Nathan made her rehearse it in the living room. That was the first one that nearly broke her. He stood by the fireplace with his phone out running a timer, and he made her do it 3 times. And after the 2nd time, he said, You're rushing the joke. Land the joke. Diane worked hard on the joke. Sorry. Don't be sorry. Just land it. Okay. And when you say the man I go home to, look at me. Don't look at the room. Look at me. That's the shot. Okay, Claire said. And Nathan said, God, you're good at this. You know that you're better at this than half my board. Claire looked at her husband holding a stopwatch on his own wife, and she said, I've had a lot of practice. He didn't hear it. He was already scrolling. Day 5. Her son kicked so hard she had to sit down on the stairs, and she sat there with both hands on her belly and whispered, I know. 11 more days, 6 more days. Hang on. Day 6 was when the trap arrived. Nathan came home at 7 with a folder, and he was casual about it, so casual, and that was how Claire knew. He'd been casual about the wedding prenup, too. He'd been casual about everything he'd ever needed her to sign. Oh, he said, setting it on the counter like a takeout menu. Sign needs a signature. Spousal thing, it's nothing. What is it? Consent for the lockup, Nathan said, opening the fridge. Because we're married, the shares are technically community adjacent, so their diligence people need a piece of paper saying you're not going to, I don't know, sell my stock out from under me. He laughed. Which, please be my guest, you'd have to know the ticker. Sure, Claire said. I'll look at it tonight. Nathan's head came out of the fridge. Look at it. Yeah. Claire, it's a form. Then it'll take me 5 minutes, she said, and smiled and went upstairs with it. She photographed all 9 pages in the guest room with the door locked and sent them to Rachel Bennett at 7:41 p.m. Rachel called at 8:04. Do not sign that. Claire sat down on the bed. Tell me. Page 7, Claire. Page 7, paragraph C. Rachel's voice had gone somewhere Claire had never heard it go. It's not a consent. I mean, it is pages 1 through 6 are exactly what he said. It's boilerplate, it's beautiful, it's bait. And then, on page 7, there's a mutual non-disparagement and confidentiality undertaking that binds you personally, individually, for 4 years, covering, and I'm quoting, any statement written or oral, public or private, concerning the founder's character, conduct, or household. The room tilted a little. "Say the last part again," Claire said. "Character, conduct, or household. That's his clause." "That's his clause," Rachel said. "Claire, that's clause 14, turned inside out and pointed at you. He's not papering the deal. He's papering you. Somebody looked at what he agreed to in that round and looked at his wife and figured out that the only person on this earth who can break his rep is the person he made it about." Claire's hand was over her mouth. "Was it Cy?" she said. "Does it matter?" "Yes," Claire said. "It matters a lot, actually. It matters whether my husband is a man who got bad advice or a man who took it." There was a pause on the line. "He initialed it," Rachel said quietly. Page 7's got his initials in the margin. He read it, Claire. He read that page and he initialed it. And then he walked into your kitchen and said, "It's nothing." Claire didn't say anything for a long moment. Then she said, "How much time do I have?" "Before what?" "Before he asks again." 12 hours, Rachel said. "Maybe 18. Claire, listen. If you refuse outright, he knows. He knows something's wrong, and he pulls you off that stage and puts Diane's script in somebody else's mouth, and you spend the rest of your life being the wife who wasn't there. And if you sign it, if I sign it, I can't say a word for 4 years. You can't say his name for 4 years. Claire looked at the ceiling. Then she said, "I'm going to sign it." "Claire?" "I'm going to sign it," Claire said in January. Silence. "Oh," Rachel said. "He wants to close in January," Claire said. "He wants to file in January. He told Cy Feldman Q1 not a day before. So I'm going to be the most agreeable woman in the state of New York about this, Rachel. And I'm going to tell him I'll sign it the second the wire clears because I don't want to be involved in anything that could complicate his round." She was almost laughing. "I'm going to tell him I want to protect him." "He'll buy that," Rachel said slowly. "He'll buy that because he's been buying it for 6 years," Claire said. "That's what I am, Rach. I'm the woman who protects him. That's my entire product." She went downstairs at 8:30 and found her husband eating cold pasta over the sink. "So I read it," she said. "And, Nathan, I don't want to sign anything before the round closes." He put the fork down. "Why?" "Because I'm scared," Claire said, and her voice did the thing, the small wobble, and she hated how easy it was. She hated how fluent she was in this. "Because it's got my name on it, and it's got the word disparagement in it, and if anybody at all ever found out that you had your pregnant wife sign a gag order 3 weeks after the gala." She stopped, wiped her eye. "Nathan, they'd bury you. Diane would have a heart attack. I'm not letting them do that to you." Nathan Whitmore stared at his wife, and then his whole face changed and he crossed the kitchen and took her by the shoulders and said with real feeling, with actual moisture in his eyes, "That's the smartest thing anybody's said to me in a month." "Yeah, Cy's an idiot," Nathan said. God, you're right. You're completely right. That's a disaster waiting to happen. January. We do it in January when nobody's looking." He kissed the top of her head. "You know what you are. You're the only person in my life who protects me." And Claire Morgan stood in her kitchen with her husband's arms around her and her son turning over inside her, and she said into his shirt, "Somebody has to, day 7, day 8, day 9. 9 was the worst. On 9, he had a photographer come to the house. 2 hours of Nathan's hand on her belly, Nathan laughing at nothing, Nathan looking down at her with an expression of such tenderness that Claire at one point forgot. That was the thing nobody warns you about. She forgot for about 4 seconds. She looked up at her husband's face, and something in her body went, "Oh, there you are." And then he broke eye contact and said over her head, "Can we get one where she's not squinting?" She went upstairs afterward and sat on the bathroom floor for 20 minutes. Then she got up and ran the speech again out loud and landed the joke. Day 10. Sam Ferreira called her. Not Nathan. Her. "Mrs. Whitmore, this is Sam Ferreira. I don't know if you picked me up off the stairs," Claire said. "Yeah, Well, he cleared his throat. How's the knee? It's fine. How's the rest of it? Claire stood very still in her own hallway. Mr. Ferreira, she said, why are you calling me? Because I've been in this business 34 years, Sam Ferreira said, and I've never in my life called a founder's wife, and I've picked up the phone to call you 11 times in the last 3 weeks and hung up. A breath. My firm's in the round, Mrs. Whitmore. Not the lead, but we're in it, and I have a vote, and I've got a call on the 9th where I have to use it, and I'm going to tell you something, and then I'm going to hang up and never mention it again. Okay? If you get up there on the 5th, he said, and you say the words that woman wrote for you, I'm voting yes, because that's my job, and I'll have no reason not to. He paused. And I want you to know that I'll hate it. That's all. That's the whole call. Good night, Mrs. Whitmore. He hung up. Claire stood in the hallway with the dead phone in her hand for a long time. Then she went and got the cream dress out of the bag and hung it on the door where she could see it from the bed. The 5th of December. The Whitmore Foundation, winter benefit at the Aldrich, in the same ballroom which had been Diane Kessler's idea and was, Claire admitted, genuinely brilliant. We don't hide from the room, we take the room back. 540 guests, the full board, Colvin Partners at Table 1, 3 networks and a live stream, because Diane wanted the raw footage out of anyone else's hands. Nathan was magnificent that night. That was the truth, and Claire would tell it that way for the rest of her life. He worked that room for 90 minutes, and he was warm and funny and self-deprecating, and twice she heard him say, I had a bad night, and I've thought about it every day since, and people forgave him. She could see it happening. She could see forgiveness moving through that ballroom like weather. At 7:52, he shook a man's hand at the edge of table 4 and said, Thanks so much for coming out, sir. Really, it means a lot. The man said, Wouldn't have missed it. And Nathan moved on. He moved on, and he never looked back, and he did not ask that man's name because that man was 71 years old and wearing a suit that was 15 years out of style, and Nathan Whitmore had 540 people to get through. At 8:40, Diane found Claire by the service door. You okay? I'm fine. You're gray. I'm 8 months pregnant, Diane. Diane Kessler looked at her for a second too long. Then she said, 3 minutes, then it's you. Just the script. Land the joke. Land the joke, Diane said. And then she didn't move. Claire looked at her. Was there something else? Diane Kessler's mouth opened, closed. I have a daughter, she said. I know. She's 26, Diane said. She's a paralegal. She's got a boyfriend I don't like. She was talking to the floor. I was in the room at the Tuesday meeting when I said the thing about the softening element. I remember, Claire said. I've said worse things in worse rooms and slept fine, Diane said. I want you to know I haven't slept since the gala. That's not an apology. I'm not apologizing. I'd do it again. It's my job. She finally looked up and her eyes were wet and furious. But he laughed, Claire. I said it and he laughed, and I've been in this business 20 years and I've never had a client laugh at that. Not once. They always flinch. He didn't flinch. Claire didn't say anything. Anyway, Diane said and cleared her throat and became a professional again in the space of 1 second. 2 minutes, you'll be great. And then turning away so quietly that Claire almost missed it. You'll be great at whatever you decide to do up there. Claire's head came up. Diane Kessler was already walking. 8:44. Nathan on the stage hitting his marks. The room warm. The room his again. And then, and listen, I'm not going to stand up here and tell you I'm a good husband. I'm going to do something better. I'm going to bring up the only person who'd know. Laughter. Real laughter. Ladies and gentlemen, my wife, Claire. 540 people stood up. They stood up for her. That was the part nobody could have planned for, and nobody could have stopped. And Claire climbed 11 carpeted stairs slowly, with her hand on the rail this time, and 540 people in that ballroom got to their feet and applauded a pregnant woman, and it went on for 19 seconds. Nathan put his hand on her back. He leaned into her ear, smiling at the room, and he said, "Told you." And Claire Morgan stepped away from her husband's hand and took the microphone off the stand. "Thank you," she said. "Please sit down, please. I'm the one who should be sitting." Laughter. They sat. 540 faces. "Diane Kessler wrote me a speech," Claire said. Somewhere at table 9, Sam Ferreira set down his glass. It's a really good speech, Claire said. It's 640 words, and I've known it cold since Tuesday, and there's a joke in it about my ankles that works every time. And the last line of the fourth paragraph says, "The man you read about last month is not the man I go home to." She looked at the room. "I'm not going to say it," she said. "I'm sorry, Diane, it's a beautiful sentence. It just isn't true." Nobody moved. Nathan's smile stayed exactly where it was, and Claire could feel him beside her, could feel the heat coming off him, and she did not look at him. "On the 24th of October, Claire said, "in this room I went down on one knee on those stairs. Some of you saw it. My husband was 4 feet away from me. He didn't give me his hand. He said, 'Get up, you're embarrassing me.'" She paused. "There are 3 cameras in this room right now, and there were 3 that night, so nobody has to take my word for it. That's all on tape. You can go watch it in the parking lot in 90 seconds. Her voice was completely level. That was the thing people talked about for years afterward. She sounded like a woman reading a weather report. "Here's what you didn't see," Claire said. "That night when we got home, my husband went into his study and made a phone call, and I sat down on the floor in the room above it in my dress, and I listened to it through the vent." The temperature in that ballroom dropped. "He was talking to his lawyer," Claire said, "and he told his lawyer that he intends to file for divorce in the first quarter of next year. Not because of anything I've done. He was very clear about that. He was going to wait until his round closed and his lockup cleared, and until after our son is born, and until after Christmas because—" And here, for the only time in the entire 2 minutes, Claire Morgan's voice moved just slightly. "And because filing while your wife is 8 months pregnant reads as unstable. And there's a clause in his deal about stability. Somebody at table 3 said out loud, 'Jesus.' He said, and I'm quoting my husband exactly, 'I'm not a monster, Sai. I'm on a timeline.'" Nathan moved. He moved fast, and he got one hand on the microphone, and he said into it, laughing, "Okay, folks, my wife is 8 months. Claire didn't let go. She didn't fight him. She didn't pull. She just held on, and she turned her head, and she looked at her husband for the first time since she'd taken the stage, and she said quietly, but the mic caught it. The mic caught every syllable and put it into 540 pairs of ears. "Nathan, give me your hand or take it off the microphone. Those are the only 2 things you're allowed to do right now." Nathan Whitmore let go. Later people would argue about why. Some said he panicked. Some said he calculated. But Diane Kessler, who was standing 30 feet away with her whole career on fire, always said the same thing, and she said it flatly, and she never elaborated. He let go because 500 people were watching him hold on to a pregnant woman, and he finally saw the shot. Claire turned back to the room. "I have one more thing," she said, "and then I'll get off the stage. I promise my back is killing me." And a few people laughed. That was the horror of it. A few people actually laughed out of pure nervous reflex, and Claire let them. "9 days ago," she said, "my husband handed me a folder in our kitchen and told me it was a form. It was a consent for his lockup. Pages 1 through 6 are exactly what he said they were. On page 7, paragraph C, there's a 4-year gag order binding me personally from making any statement, public or private, about his character, conduct, or household." She paused. "His initials are in the margin." He read it, and then he came into my kitchen and said it's nothing. She looked out at table 1 where Colvin Partners had gone the color of milk. "I didn't sign it," Claire said, and a man at table 4 said, "Let her finish." It wasn't loud. It was an old man's voice, dry and calm from a table with no name cards that mattered, and it cut through that ballroom like a dropped plate. Nathan turned toward it, annoyed, ready to charm it, and then he stopped. Because Alec Reyes had turned around too. Alec Reyes of Colvin Partners had stood up, and Nathan Whitmore watched with total incomprehension as the man who was about to wire him 9 figures got out of his chair at table 1 and buttoned his jacket for a 71-year-old man in a bad suit. "Mr. Morgan," Alec Reyes said. Nathan's head turned very slowly toward his wife. "Nathan," Claire said into the microphone, and now her voice was gentle, and that was the worst thing about it. It was actually gentle. "You've met my father 4 times. The ballroom did not make a sound. "He came to our wedding," Claire said. "He sat at Thanksgiving with you. He was in the waiting room with you when my mother died. You've shaken his hand 5 times, including 48 minutes ago at that table, and you called him sir, and you thanked him for coming, and you walked away." She stopped. "Let it sit. You never once asked him what he did." Nathan's mouth opened. "His name is Edward Morgan," Claire said. "He founded Morgan Capital Group in 1981. Nathan, he's an LP in your round." Something happened to Nathan Whitmore's face that no camera in that room quite captured, and there were 9 of them. 19 months ago, Claire said, a deck with your name on it crossed my father's desk, and on page 11 there was a photograph of me, and he sat in that room and said nothing because I asked him 6 years ago to let me have a life he wasn't in. He kept that promise every day. He never blocked you, not $1. Her hand went to her belly. "But he did do one thing. He asked for a clause." Nathan Whitmore whispered no. "Clause 14, Claire said. The character rep. The one Colvin thinks is embarrassing and took anyway because of who asked. Nathan, you signed it 19 months ago. It's a door, that's all it is. It's a door with a sign on it that says don't." She looked at him. "A good man walks past it his whole life and never knows it's there. It doesn't cost him anything." And then Claire Morgan said the last thing. "You told Cy Feldman that my family was nothing," she said. "You said there's nobody to call." She put the microphone back on the stand. "There was somebody to call," she said. "You just never asked." She walked down the 11 stairs on her own. Edward Morgan was standing at the bottom of them. He had not moved from a table 4 all night. He had not saved her. He had not lifted a finger, and he stood at the bottom of those stairs with his hands at his sides and did not reach for her because his daughter had asked him not to. And Claire got to the last step and looked at her father and said, "Dad." And Edward Morgan said, "I've got you." Then he put out his hand. She took it. And that was the photograph. That was the 1 out of 9 cameras and 540 phones that ran on every front page in the country by Sunday. And it wasn't Nathan on the stairs, and it wasn't Claire at the microphone. It was a 71-year-old man in a bad suit holding his daughter's hand. Behind them on the stage, Nathan Whitmore was still standing under his own name in 12-foot letters, saying to no one in particular in a voice that kept climbing, "Okay, everybody hang on a second." Nobody hung on. Alec Reyes was already at the coat check with his phone to his ear. Sam Ferreira had been on his feet since the word timeline, and when Claire passed table 9, he said, "Mrs. Whitmore." And she stopped, and he said, "I've got a call on the 9th. "I know," Claire said. "I'm going to enjoy it," Sam Ferreira said. Diane Kessler was standing by the service door with her arms crossed and her jaw set, and as Claire went past her, she said without turning her head, 640 words, and you didn't use one of them." "I used one," Claire said. "Thank you." Diane Kessler laughed. It came out of her like something breaking loose. "I quit at 9:02, she said. "Just so you know, 2 minutes before you went up. It's in writing." She wiped her face with the back of her wrist and grinned wet and wrecked and free. "I'm going to tell people it was principle. It was going to be principle." Nathan caught them at the doors. He got there ahead of the crowd, and he was breathing hard, and his tie was crooked for the first time in 6 years, and he looked past Claire directly at her father and said the only thing left in him. "Sir? Mr. Morgan? Ed, listen to me. This is a misunderstanding. There's context here. There's a whole context if you'd just give me 10 minutes. Edward Morgan looked at him. And Nathan kept going faster now, and here it was, the thing Claire had known would come, the thing she'd told her father about in a kitchen in Connecticut, with her whole heart breaking. "And honestly, sir, with respect, this is a family matter, and you coming in here tonight and doing this to me in front of my board, in front of my investors?" "Nathan," Claire said. He didn't stop. "You've destroyed a company, do you understand that? 19 months. You put a trap in my paper for 19 months. What kind of man does that to his own—" Nathan Whitmore stopped, and Claire Morgan, standing between her husband and her father, with her son kicking under her hand, said, "He didn't do anything to you." Nathan stared at her. "He sat at table 4 for 2 hours, and he didn't say a word," Claire said. "He didn't call your board. He didn't call Colvin. He never blocked you, not $1, not once in 19 months. All he ever did was write down a promise and let you sign it." She shook her head slowly. "Nathan, you did this. On the 24th of October, at 10:15 at night, in front of 300 people, you looked at the cameras instead of your wife. That's the whole thing. That's the entire event. Everything after that is just paperwork catching up. Nathan's eyes were moving between them, fast hunting. You planned this, he said. You planned this. You've been for weeks, you've been... And his voice cracked open, and out of it came the truest thing he'd said in 6 years. You were lying to me. And Claire Morgan looked at her husband with something that was not triumph and was not even anger. It looked to the 4 people close enough to see it almost like grief. Yes, she said, for 11 days. Then she walked out through the doors on her father's arm. The car was on 57th before Claire said anything at all. Dad. Yeah. You said you wouldn't come. Edward Morgan looked out the window. I said, don't call me, he said. I never said I wouldn't buy a ticket. Table 4. $900, her father said. Chicken was terrible. And Claire Morgan started laughing, and then she was crying, and then she was doing both at once with her forehead against her father's shoulder while the city went by, and Edward Morgan put his arm around his daughter for the first time in 6 years and said absolutely nothing, because he had learned a long time ago that the kindest thing a man can do is shut up and hold still. At 11:40 that night, Claire's phone rang. It was Nathan. She looked at it. She let it go. It rang again at 11:41. And 11:43, and 11:46. By 1 in the morning, he had called her 31 times, and Claire had not answered a single one, and at 1:15 the call stopped, and a text came in instead, and the text said, I'm going to lose everything. Please, please, Claire, please pick up. She read it 4 times. Then she put the phone face down on her father's guest room dresser and lay in the dark in a house she'd grown up in, 32 years old, 8 months pregnant, and she did not sleep, and she did not pick up, and around 3 in the morning her son woke up and started moving, and she put both hands over him and whispered, That's the last thing he ever gets from me. That's it. That was the last one. Rachel Bennett called at 6:20. Are you sitting down? Rach, it's 6:20. Claire, are you sitting down? I'm lying down. The live stream, Rachel said. Diane's live stream, the one she set up so nobody else would own the footage. She was talking very fast. It's at 9 million views. It went up 9 hours ago. It's at 9 million, and it's climbing about 400,000 an hour, and I have been on the phone since 4. Claire sat up. 9 million, she said. Claire, the clip's not even the speech. Rachel's voice cracked. That's what I'm calling to tell you. The clip that's moving isn't you at the microphone. It's 41 seconds long, and it's got 11 million on its own, and it's just the stairs. The stairs. You coming down, and your dad standing there with his hands at his sides, not touching you, and you saying, Dad, and him saying, I've got you. Rachel stopped, breathed. 41 seconds. Somebody put a caption on it. You want to hear the caption? No. This is what it looks like when a man loves his daughter. Claire put her hand over her mouth. It's on every morning show in the country, Rachel said. In about 90 minutes, it's going to be on every morning show on Earth. Claire, my office, got 400 emails overnight. Not press, women. 400 women. Claire from Ohio and Texas and Scotland, all writing the same email, and the email says he did that to me too, and nobody filmed it. Claire didn't say anything for a long time. Claire, I'm here. Say something. I don't know what to do with that, Claire said, and her voice was very small. Rachel, I don't know what to do with 400 women. Well, Rachel said, you've got about 6 hours to figure it out, because at noon it's going to be 4,000. At 9:05 that morning, Colvin Partners issued a statement that was 2 sentences long and said nothing and meant everything. They were pausing the transaction pending review of the founder's representations under Section 14 of the term sheet. That was it. That was the whole statement. By 9:40, the number was on Bloomberg, and the number was that Whitmore Technologies had been going to close at $1.1 billion, and by 10:15, there were 4 separate law firms in Manhattan on the phone with people who owned pieces of the company, and by noon, a man named Gerald Vance, who had been Nathan's board chairman for 4 years and had personally cut the first check, said the sentence that finished it. He said it to a reporter off the cuff, walking to a car. I'm not going to comment on the marriage, Gerald Vance said. I'll comment on the folder. He had his pregnant wife's signature lined up on a gag order and told her it was a form. That's not a bad husband. That's a man practicing on his own family. He got in the car. Then he leaned back out. And if he practices on them, he practices on us. That quote ran for 11 days. Tyson. At 2 that afternoon, Cy Feldman resigned as outside counsel to Whitmore Technologies and issued a statement through a publicist claiming he had advised against the folder. At 2:20, a person who was not Claire and was not Rachel, and was never identified but who had once run public relations for Whitmore Technologies and had quit at 9:02 on the 5th of December, provided a single document to the Wall Street Journal. It was an email. It was dated 11 days before the folder. It was from Cy Feldman to Nathan Whitmore, and it was 6 words long. This is aggressive. Are you sure? And underneath it, Nathan Whitmore had replied, She'll sign anything. She always does. Claire read that one in her father's kitchen at 2:45 in the afternoon with a cup of tea going cold in front of her, and Edward Morgan watched her read it and watched her set the phone down and watched her stare out the window at a lawn she'd learned to walk on. Sweetheart, I'm okay. Claire, I said I'm okay, Dad. You're not, her father said, and that's allowed. That's actually allowed, you know. You can win and still be on the floor about it. Those aren't opposites. Half the men I've known spent their whole lives thinking those were opposites, and they all died confused. Claire's chin went. 6 years, she said. I know. 6 years, Dad. And it turns out the whole entire time I was... She stopped, started over. You know what hurts? It's not the folder. It's she'll sign anything she always does. Because he's right. Her voice broke wide open. He's right. I did. For 6 years, I signed anything he put in front of me. I said yes to everything I made myself so easy to be married to, that he stopped being able to see me. And I did that, Dad. Nobody did that to me. I did that. I made myself into a thing you could put in a folder. Edward Morgan sat down across from his daughter. Can I say something? He said, as an old man and not as your father. Sure. You didn't make yourself easy, he said. You made yourself safe. Those look identical from the outside, and they are nothing alike. He turned his cup a quarter turn the way he always did. You met a man who was starving, and you decided you'd never be one more thing that took from him. That's not weakness, Claire. That's the most generous thing I've ever watched a person do, and it went on for 6 years, and he ate every bit of it and asked for more, and that is not a mark against you. That's a mark against him. Dad? I'm not finished, Edward Morgan said. You want to know what you actually did wrong. One thing. You gave him the benefit of the doubt 100% of the time, and no human being on this earth deserves 100%. He looked up at her. Give the next one 90. Keep 10 for yourself. That's the whole lesson. That's all I've got, and it took me 44 years and your mother to learn it. Claire wiped her face. There isn't going to be a next one, she said. Sure, her father said. I'm just saying keep the 10. At 4 that afternoon, Nathan Whitmore did the interview. Nobody could stop him. He didn't have Diane anymore. He didn't have Cy. He had a publicist he'd hired that morning off a Google search, and he sat down at 4 p.m. in his own living room in a brownstone he no longer had the cash flow to keep, and he did 11 minutes on national television, and those 11 minutes ended him more completely than his wife ever could have. He was charming for the first 6. He was contrite. He was rueful. He said, I've thought about that night every single day. He said, I was under a pressure I'm not going to describe because it sounds like an excuse. He said, my wife is an extraordinary woman. And at 6 minutes and 40 seconds, the interviewer said, Mr. Whitmore, do you regret the folder? I regret how it was characterized. That's not what I asked. It was a standard. Do you regret it? And Nathan Whitmore said, it was a piece of paper, and if my wife had come to me like an adult instead of taking it to a stage, he caught it. He caught it about 1/3 of a second late, and he tried to swallow it, and he couldn't, and everybody in America watched him not be able to. Instead of taking it to a stage, the interviewer repeated, that's not, sir, that was your stage. You invited her onto it. And Nathan Whitmore, live on camera in his own living room, said the sentence that got turned into a ringtone. I invited her onto it to help me. The interview ran for 4 more minutes. Nobody remembers those 4 minutes. At 6 p.m., the Whitmore Technologies board met by phone for 19 minutes. At 6:20, Nathan was placed on administrative leave from the company he had founded in a rented room in Long Island City with 2 laptops and a space heater. At 6:22, he called his wife for the 32nd time. And this time, Claire picked up. She didn't plan it. That's the part she never could explain to anybody afterward, not to Rachel, not to her father, not to the therapist she saw for 2 years. She was standing at her father's window watching it get dark, and the phone rang, and her hand just did it. Claire? Hi, Nathan. He started crying immediately. It was instantaneous, and it was total, and Claire stood at that window and listened to her husband come apart, and she felt her own eyes go hot, because it turns out you can know exactly what a man is and still have 6 years of your nervous system reaching for him. They took the company, he said. Claire, they took my company. Gerald called me. Gerald. He said the words administrative leave to me. I built the whole... He stopped, breathed. I'm sorry. That's not why I called. Why did you call? Because I'm sorry, Nathan said. Claire. God. Claire, I'm so sorry. And there it was. Claire closed her eyes. For what? She said. What? You said you're sorry. I'm asking what for. For all of it, Nathan said. For everything, for the gala, for the folder, for... Nathan, Claire said. Name it. Silence. Name one thing, she said. One. Not all of it, not everything. One specific thing that you did with your body on a specific day that hurt me. That's it. That's the whole test, and you've got as long as you want. The line was quiet for 11 seconds. She counted them. I said get up, Nathan said. Okay, Claire said. Good, yes. And then what? And you were on the floor. On one knee. On one knee, he said. And I didn't. And his voice went. And for 1 second, 1 single second, Claire Morgan heard something in her husband that she had never heard in 6 years. Something raw and small and true. And it said, I didn't give you my hand. Claire put her forehead against the cold window. Yeah, she said. Claire, I don't know why I didn't. I've thought about it for 6 weeks. I've thought about nothing else. I stand in the kitchen, and I try to remember what I was thinking, and there's nothing there. There's just nothing there. There's a hole. I looked at you, and there was a hole where the thing should have been. I know, Claire said quietly. I saw it. Help me, Nathan said, and Claire opened her eyes. There it is, she said. What? You got 9 seconds, she said. Nathan, you got 9 actual seconds of being a person, and then you said help me. She was not angry. She sounded in that moment unbelievably tired. That's what I mean. That's what I've been trying to tell you for 6 weeks, and I never had the words. It's not that you're cruel. You're not cruel. It's that everything has to come back around to you inside about 10 seconds or you can't hold on to it. That's not fair. Your son, Claire said. What? You haven't asked about your son, Claire said. Nathan, it's 6:25 in the evening on the 6th of December. We've been on the phone for 4 minutes and you have not asked me one question about the baby. The silence on that line went on for a very long time. How is he? Nathan said. He's fine, Claire said. I'm hanging up now. Claire, I'm not doing this to punish you, she said. And she meant it. She meant every word, and that was what made it unsurvivable. I want you to understand that. I'm not angry. I'm not getting anything out of this. I'm just done, Nathan. That's all it is. 6 years ago, you asked me for 4 hours in a bar about a business plan, and you never asked me for anything again, and I stayed anyway, and now I'm going to go have a baby. Please don't hang up. Goodbye, Nathan, Claire said. And she hung up on her husband for the first time in 6 years, and then she stood at that window and shook for about 40 seconds, and then she went downstairs and ate a sandwich her father made her because she was 8 months pregnant, and the baby didn't care about any of it. Her son was born on the 19th of December at 4:12 in the morning. 7 pounds 1 ounce, 21 hours of labor. Rachel Bennett on one side and Edward Morgan in the corridor the entire time because he would not sit down, 71 years old, pacing a hospital hallway for 21 hours in the same bad suit, and a nurse tried 3 separate times to get him to take a chair, and he said every time, "No thank you, ma'am." Claire named him James after her mother's father. She did not give him the name Whitmore. She thought about it for 11 days beforehand, and she thought about it in that room while she waited, and what she landed on, she said out loud to Rachel at 3 a.m, between contractions. "It's not to take something from Nathan," she said. "Claire, no, listen. Listen to me, this matters." She was gripping the rail. "If I do it to take something from Nathan, then Nathan's still in it. He's in the middle of it forever. My son's name would be about him." She breathed through it. "I want James to have a name that has nothing to do with the worst thing that ever happened to his mother." Rachel Bennett, who had not cried once in 19 years of practicing law, put her head down on the bed rail. At 4:12, they put him on Claire's chest. And Claire Morgan looked down at her son, and here's what nobody tells you. Here's the thing. She was still trying to explain to people 20 years later. She didn't feel triumphant. She didn't feel avenged. She felt something else entirely, and it went through her like a current, and it was this. "Oh, you didn't cost me anything." That's what it was. That's what she'd been afraid of for 8 months and hadn't been able to say out loud even to Rachel, even to her father, even alone at 3 a.m. She had been terrified in the deepest floor of herself that when they handed her this baby, she would look down at him and see Nathan's face and feel the whole thing all over again, that he'd be tainted, that she'd been carrying the wreck of her life around inside her body for 9 months and would have to look at it every day forever. And instead there was a completely brand new person on her chest who had never been humiliated on a staircase, who had never signed anything, who had never had to be agreeable, who did not know a single thing about Whitmore Technologies, and who was at 4:12 in the morning on the 19th of December, screaming his head off about it. "Hi," Claire whispered. "Oh, hi." Her father came in at 4:40. He stood in the doorway. "Dad, come here. I'll get my hands washed." "Dad, come here." And Edward Morgan crossed the room and looked down at his grandson, and his whole face broke, and he said in a voice Claire had heard exactly twice, once at a funeral, and once in a kitchen in Connecticut, "Well, look at you. Do you want to hold him?" "I do," Edward Morgan said. "Very much. But I'm not going to for a minute because I'm going to remember this for the rest of my life, and I want to remember it with him right there." Nobody said anything for a while. Then Claire said, "Dad." "Yeah, sweetheart. He was born at 4:12 in the morning," she said, "and his father doesn't know." Edward Morgan didn't answer. "I'm going to tell him," Claire said. "I want that on the record. I'm going to tell him today, and he's going to get every hour a court gives him, and I'm never going to say one word to this boy against his father as long as I live. Not one. He gets to find out for himself in his own time at his own speed, and if he decides he loves the man, that's his right, and I'll drive him there myself." "Okay," her father said. "But he doesn't know yet," Claire said, and her voice finally cracked at 4:40 in the morning after 21 hours. "And for 1 hour, Dad, for 1 single hour, I'm going to have a son that Nathan Whitmore has never been in the same room with. That's all I want. 1 hour. Is that a terrible thing?" And Edward Morgan said, "Claire, take 2. She called Nathan at 6:35 that morning. He was there in 40 minutes. He'd sold the car by then. He came in an Uber, and he stood in that doorway in a coat that cost more than the nursemaid in a month and looked at his son, and Claire watched his face very carefully because she had promised herself she would watch it. Something was there. That was the truth, and she told it that way for the rest of her life. And it never got easier to say. Something was actually there. Nathan Whitmore looked at his son, and his eyes filled and his hands came up, and he said, "Oh my God." And he meant it, and Claire saw it, and it was real. And then 41 seconds later he said, "He's got my chin." And Claire Morgan closed her eyes and knew with absolute finality that it was never going to be different. It was never going to be different for one day of that boy's entire life. Not because Nathan didn't love him. He did. In whatever way Nathan Whitmore was capable of loving anything, he loved that baby. It was just that 41 seconds was all he had. "Do you want to hold him?" Claire said. And Nathan said, "Can somebody get a picture?" The divorce took 14 months. It was ugly, and then it wasn't, and Claire never talked about the ugly part publicly. Not once, not in 11 interviews, not in the book she eventually didn't write. Rachel Bennett handled it. Nathan fought over things that made no sense and conceded things that did, and in month 9 his lawyer sent over a proposal so aggressive that Rachel called Claire at 11 at night and said, "I need you to say the word and I will end him." And Claire said no. "Claire, he's asking for—" "I know what he's asking for." "Then let me—" "Rachel," Claire said, "in 20 years my son is going to be old enough to pull the file. He can do it. It's public. And one day he's going to sit in a room by himself and read every single thing his mother did to his father." She was quiet a second. "I want that boy to read it and find out his mother was fair. That's worth more than the money. That's worth more than anything in that file." Rachel didn't say anything. "Give him what he's legally owed," Claire said. "Not $1 less, and then I'm done." The company went into a restructuring in April. Whitmore Technologies got bought at 11 cents on the dollar by a firm that stripped the name off the building within a week. Gerald Vance stayed on the board. Sam Ferreira, who had a call on the 9th of December and had by his own account enjoyed it enormously, retired the following spring and sent Claire a note that said only 34 years. "Best vote I ever cast." SF Nathan Whitmore ended up in Austin. He was fine. That was the thing nobody wanted to hear, and Claire always told them anyway. He wasn't in a gutter. He got a job at a company he didn't own making a very good living, and he was, from everything Claire ever heard, extremely well liked there. He was charming. He'd always been charming. He came to New York 11 times a year and took his son to the zoo and posted about it. He never got another $1 billion, and he never stopped believing he was about to. And once 3 years later at a wedding, a man Claire didn't know cornered her by the bar and said, "You're the woman who blew up her husband." And Claire said, "No, I'm not." "Sure you are. I saw the video." "You saw a man refuse to give his wife his hand," Claire said. "And then you saw 11 months of other people deciding what that meant. I didn't blow up anything. I said 4 true sentences in a normal voice." She picked up her drink. The rest of it was just people who'd been waiting a long time to hear somebody say them. But all of that came later. In the meantime, there were 400 emails, and then 4,000. And then by the second week of January, there were 19,000 emails sitting in a folder on a laptop in Connecticut. And Claire Morgan sat down at her father's kitchen table at 11 o'clock at night with a 3-week-old on her chest and started reading them. And she read for 6 hours, and around 5 in the morning, Edward Morgan came down in his robe and found his daughter crying so hard she couldn't see the screen. "Sweetheart." "They're all the same," Claire said. "Claire." "Dad, they're all the same." She turned the laptop toward him. "Every single one, 19,000 women, and they all say the same 4 things. They say he did it to me too. They say I didn't have a father. They say I couldn't afford a lawyer." She wiped her face with her wrist. "And they all say the same last line, Dad. Every one of them. You want to know what it is?" Edward Morgan sat down. "I stayed." Nobody said anything. Then Claire Morgan looked at her father across a kitchen table at 5 in the morning with her son asleep on her chest, and she said, "I had a father who wrote a clause. I had a friend who was a lawyer. I had a room with a vent in it, and a husband stupid enough to hand me a microphone." Her jaw set. "Dad, I had everything. I had every single advantage a woman could possibly have, and it still took me 6 years and a staircase." She closed the laptop. "What about the ones who don't have any of it?" she said. Edward Morgan didn't answer that question for 11 days. That was the thing about her father that Claire had spent her whole life failing to explain to people. He didn't argue. He didn't reassure. He took a question home the way a man takes a rock home in his pocket, and he turned it over for a week and a half, and then, on the 16th of January, he called his daughter at 7 in the morning and said, "Come to Connecticut, bring the boy." "Dad, it's 7. "I know what time it is," Edward Morgan said. "I've been up since 4. She drove up with James in the back and found her father at the kitchen table with 3 legal pads and a cold cup of coffee, and a face she had seen exactly once before at a hospital on the worst night of both their lives. "Sit down," he said. "Dad, Claire, sit down because I've done something and you're going to be angry and I want you sitting." She sat. "You asked me a question," Edward Morgan said. "You asked what about the ones who don't have any of it, And I've been chewing on it for 11 days, and I want to walk you through what I found, and then I want you to tell me to go to hell if that's what you want, and I'll do it." "Dad, what did you do?" "I had a man run the numbers," her father said. "A real one, not a foundation guy. A guy who does diligence for me when I'm putting 8 figures somewhere and I need to know the floor." He pushed a legal pad across the table. "Claire, do you know what the number one reason is that a woman stays? Money." "No," Edward Morgan said. "Everybody thinks that. It's not that." He tapped the pad. "It's the first 4 days." Claire looked up. "She leaves on a Tuesday," her father said, "and by Saturday she's got no lawyer, no filing, no order, no plan, and she's sitting in a motel with 2 kids and $41, and he calls, and he's sorry, and he's crying, and she goes back, not because she's weak, because there was nothing in those 4 days. There was a hole in the world where the help should have been, and she fell in it." He sat back. "It's not money, sweetheart, it's speed. Everybody in this country builds shelters and hotlines and support groups, and God bless them. But there's nobody standing in the first 4 days with a lawyer and a filing and a piece of paper that says, 'You are not crazy, and here is what happens next.'" Claire stared at the pad. "So I bought one," Edward Morgan said. "You what?" "There's a legal aid outfit in Queens," her father said. 11 attorneys, 4 of them. Any good been running on fumes since 2019. I wrote them a check on Monday, and they have no idea where it came from. And they never will." He shrugged. "That's not the part you're going to be angry about. Dad, the part you're going to be angry about," Edward Morgan said, "is that I put it in your name." Claire's mouth opened. "Not the money. The money's anonymous. The money's mine. The money's got nothing to do with you." He looked at her steadily. "The building is in your name, Claire. There's a lease, and there's a board seat with nobody in it, and there's a phone that rings, and I did all of it in 11 days without asking you. And if you want to walk out that door and never speak to me about it again, I'll unwind the whole thing by Friday, and you'll never hear the word again." "Why would you do that?" "Because you asked me a question at 5 in the morning. Edward Morgan said, "And then you closed the laptop." Claire didn't say anything. "I've watched you close that laptop your whole life," her father said. "You closed it on the magazine. You closed it on the fellowship. You closed it in 2019 when you found out he'd told his board you were quitting before he told you, and you came up here and you sat in that exact chair, and you said, 'It's fine, Dad, it's not the right time.'" He leaned forward. "I have never once in 32 years seen my daughter want something out loud. Not once. And at 5 in the morning on the 9th of January, you wanted something out loud, and I'm 71 years old, and I'm not going to sit here and watch you close it." "But, Claire Morgan put her face in her hands. "I don't know how to run anything," she said. "You ran a 2-minute speech in front of 540 people," her father said, "and took $1 billion off the table with it. That's not the same." "No," Edward Morgan agreed. "That was harder." She named it The Fourth Day. Nobody understood the name. That was the point. For 11 years, every single person who ever wrote about it asked her what it meant, and Claire told the story every single time, all of it the motel, and the $41 and the phone call on Saturday, and it never got shorter, and she never once let anybody put it on a plaque. It opened on the 11th of March with 4 attorneys and a phone number and no press. That was Claire's condition, and she was immovable about it. Rachel Bennett fought her for 6 weeks. "Claire, you have 19,000 emails and 11 million views and a name that is currently worth something for about 9 more months. So use it." "Rachel," Claire said, "if we open with press, do you know who calls that number on day 1? Reporters, producers, women who want to be on television." She shook her head. "The women I want don't have a laptop. They've got a phone with a cracked screen in a Duane Reade parking lot, and 40 minutes before he notices, she's gone. She's not calling a headline. She's calling because her cousin's hairdresser wrote a number on a receipt." Rachel opened her mouth, closed it. "That's the best argument I've ever lost," she said. The phone rang 11 times the first week. Claire answered 9 of them herself because there was nobody else, and because she didn't know yet that you can't do that, that no human being can absorb that at volume and stay standing. She learned. It took 4 months and one very bad night in August, and a woman named Deborah who called from a gas station in Yonkers and then stopped calling, and Claire looked for that woman for 6 years and never found her, and she never got over it. Not once. Not ever. "You can't do this," Rachel told her in the office at 11 at night in month 5. "I'm fine." "Claire, you're not sleeping. You've got a 9-month-old. You took 11 calls today." "Rachel, if I don't take them, who?" "Somebody who isn't you," Rachel said. "That's the whole answer. That's the entire answer. And you've known it for a month, and you won't say it out loud, and you know why. Because you think if you're not personally bleeding, then it doesn't count." She was almost shouting. "That's him, Claire. That's the exact thing he taught you, that you're only worth what you give away." Claire went very still. "Say that again," she said. "Claire." "No, say it again, slowly." And Rachel Bennett said it again, slowly, and Claire Morgan sat in a folding chair in a rented office in Queens at 11 o'clock at night and understood that she had gotten out of the marriage and taken the marriage with her. She hired a director in November. The woman's name was Diane Kessler. Rachel found out by text and called 11 seconds later. "Are you insane?" "Probably." "Claire, that woman, called you an asset in a conference room." "Yes." "She wrote you a script." "Yes." "And she is the single most cold-blooded operator I have ever met in 20 years of—" "Yes," Claire said. "Rachel, yes, all of it. And do you know what else she is?" She was smiling. Rachel could hear it. "She's the only person on this earth who knows exactly how they do it. Diane Kessler spent 20 years teaching men like Nathan how to look like men who aren't Nathan. She built the machine Rach. She knows every bolt in it." Silence. "And she quit at 9:02, Claire said. 2 minutes before I went up. Nobody made her. Nobody was watching. Nobody would have ever known." Her voice changed. "She did it in the dark, Rachel. That's the only kind that counts." The line was quiet a long time. "If she burns you," Rachel said, "I will end her." "I know you will," Claire said. Diane Kessler walked into that office on a Monday, looked at the phone system, looked at the intake forms, looked at the 4 attorneys and said, "This is amateur hour, and I'm going to fix all of it, and none of you are going to like me." She was there for 19 years. And in year 2, she did the thing that Claire never could have done, the thing Claire didn't even know was a thing, which was that Diane Kessler went to every general counsel at every firm in Manhattan she had ever done a favor for, and she called in 20 years of them in 11 months, and by the end of it, the 4th day, had 140 pro bono attorneys on a rotation and a promise nobody else in the country could make. The promise was 4 words long, and it was on the wall, and it was the only thing on the wall. Someone within 4 hours. Nathan Whitmore called Claire twice a year for 11 years. She always took it. That was a rule she made and never broke, and she never fully explained it to anybody, but the closest she ever got was one night when James was 9 and asked her out of nowhere at a dinner table, "Mom, do you hate Dad?" And Claire put her fork down. "No," she said. "Do you like him?" "That's a harder question." "Rachel hates him." "Rachel loves me," Claire said. "And that's a different job. She's allowed." James thought about that. "Grandpa doesn't say anything about him." "No," Claire agreed. "Grandpa's very good at not saying anything. It's basically his superpower." "But do you hate him?" James said. And Claire Morgan looked at her son across a table 9 years old, chin out, absolutely refusing to be handled, and she thought, "Oh, you're not agreeable at all, are you? Thank God." "Your father did something to me," she said, "before you were born that hurt more than anything anybody's ever done, and a lot of people found out about it, and it cost him almost everything he had." She held his eyes. "That's the true story, and you can look up every word. Now here's the part that's mine and not yours. I've decided he's a man with a hole in him. Not a monster. A hole. And I've decided I'm not going to spend 1 hour of my life being angry at a hole." She picked her fork back up. But that's my decision, James, about my life. You get to make your own, and whatever you decide about him at any age for any reason, I will never once argue with you about it. James was quiet for a while. Then he said, "That's a really annoying answer." "Yeah," Claire said. "I've been working on it for 9 years." Edward Morgan died on the 4th of April, 12 years after the ballroom. He was 83. It was fast, which he'd have wanted, and it was at home, which he'd have wanted, and it was in that kitchen, which nobody could have planned, and Claire got there in 90 minutes and was holding his hand for the last 40. He said 3 things. The first was about the lawnmower, and it made no sense, and Claire laughed and cried at the same time. The second was your mother's chair, and the third one at the end when Claire had her forehead on the back of his hand, 10%. "What? Keep the 10. Edward Morgan said. Those were the last words. 4,000 people wanted to come to the funeral. Claire had it in a church in Connecticut with 60. No press, no board, no firm. 4 rows of family, 2 rows of fourth-day staff, and a man in the back nobody recognized who turned out to be the guy who serviced the lawnmower twice a year and had come on his own and stood the whole time. Claire spoke for 4 minutes. "My father was one of the wealthiest men in this country," she said, "and I need you all to understand that this had nothing to do with anything." She looked at the room. "When I was 7, I asked him what he did. He said I help people build things. When I was 19, I asked him why he never went on television. He said because then you'd be somebody's daughter instead of somebody." She stopped, steadied. "And when I was 32 years old and I sat in his kitchen and told him what my husband had done to me, do you know what he did? He offered to do nothing." Her voice cracked wide open. "He offered to sit in that chair and fix a lawnmower that didn't need fixing, and never say that man's name again because his daughter had asked him for one thing in her whole life. And he'd have done it. He'd have died in that chair with his mouth shut if I'd said the word." Nobody in that church moved. "Everybody wants to talk about the clause," Claire said. 19 months, $1 billion, the whole thing." "Fine. Here's what the clause actually was." She wiped her face with her wrist exactly the way he always had. "My father had 1 phone call. 1. He could have made 1 phone call, and that man would have gone to his grave thinking the market turned on him, and my father didn't make it. Because that's not a test, that's just a rich man deciding, and Edward Morgan did not believe he had the right to decide who his daughter got to love. She held the edge of the podium. "So instead he wrote a door," she said, "with a sign on it that said, 'Don't.' And he gave a man 19 months and every dollar he asked for and total freedom to walk past that door his entire life and never know it was there." Her jaw set. "That's my father. That is the whole man right there. He handed a boy who had nothing all the rope in the world and 1 written warning, and then he let him choose. And when the boy chose, my dad didn't gloat, and he didn't call, and he didn't lift 1 finger. He bought a $900 ticket and sat at table 4 and ate bad chicken and waited to see if his daughter needed a hand at the bottom of the stairs. She looked up. She did, Claire said, and he had one. That was the whole eulogy. The 4th day was in 11 states by the 15th year. Claire never took a salary. That was a thing that came out eventually, and she hated that it came out, and when a reporter asked her about it, she said, "Don't do that. Don't make that the story. I could afford not to take one. 99% of the people in this building couldn't, and they're here at 7 in the morning anyway, and that's the story." She leaned in. "You want a hero. Go ask Marisol at the front desk what she makes. Go ask her why she stays. Print that." They printed it. Marisol got a raise twice and 11 job offers and stayed anyway and worked there for 22 years. By the 20th year, the number was 211,000. 211,000 women in 11 states in 20 years. Somebody put that on a slide at a gala once without asking Claire, and Claire looked at it on the screen and had to leave the room. Rachel found her in a hallway. "Hey, I'm fine." "Claire." "I'm fine, Rach, She pressed her fingers to her eyes. "It's a number. They made it a number. Every one of those is a woman at a gas station at 11 at night, and there's a woman named Deborah who called from Yonkers in the 1st August, and I never found her. I never found her, Rachel, and she's not on that slide." "No," Rachel said, "she's not. So what's the number for? And Rachel Bennett, 61 years old, said, "It's for the next Deborah. That's it, that's all it's for. Some woman is going to see that slide in 11 years and it's going to be the reason she picks up the phone." Claire didn't answer for a second. Then she said, "Okay. Okay. Okay," Claire said, "but I'm not going back in there." "Nobody's asking you to," Rachel said. "Come on, I know a place. The chicken's terrible." Nathan Whitmore called for the last time when James was 19. It was a Tuesday. Claire was 51. She took it in her office with the door closed. "Claire." "Hi, Nathan." "He didn't call me back," Nathan said. "James, I called him 3 times. He didn't call me back." "I know." "Did you say something to him?" And Claire closed her eyes, and 11 years of practice held. "No," she said. "Claire." "Nathan, I have never said one word to that boy against you, and I never will, and you know that because you've been checking for 19 years. She kept her voice level. "He's 19. He's got his own opinions. You're going to have to go get them from him." Silence on the line. Then Nathan Whitmore said quietly, "He's got my chin." And Claire Morgan sat in her office with her hand over her mouth because she had not thought about that sentence in 19 years, and it went through her like a knife. And she understood finally with total clarity that Nathan didn't remember saying it, that he had said it in a hospital room 41 seconds after meeting his son, and it had meant nothing at all, and he'd said it now because it was the only thing he had, because it had always been the only thing he had, because there had never been anything else in there. "Yeah," Claire said. "He does." "Claire, I'm asking you for help." "I know," she said. "You always do." She wasn't cruel about it. She wasn't anything about it. That was the part that had taken her 20 years to earn, and she still couldn't explain how she'd gotten there. "Nathan," she said, "call him again on Sunday. Don't ask him for anything. Don't tell him about work. Ask him one question about his life and then be quiet for 10 seconds. 10. Count them." She paused. "Can you do that?" "Of course I can do that." "Then do it," Claire said. "And Nathan." "Yeah, that's the whole thing," she said. "That's it. That's the entire thing. That's what it was in the bar in Long Island City. That's what it was on the stairs. It was never money. It was never a clause." Her voice was very gentle. "It was 10 seconds. He didn't call on Sunday. James was 24 when he asked her the last question. They were in Connecticut. It was April. They'd been to the grave the way they went every April, and they were sitting on the porch of the house Claire had never been able to sell, and James said, "Mom, can I ask you something? You're going to hate, always." "Was it worth it?" "Was what worth it?" "The stage," James said. "The 2 minutes. He lost everything and you got—" He gestured at the air. 20 years of a phone that rings. And I've read all of it, every word, and I've never once been able to figure out if you'd do it again." Claire looked at her son for a long time. "That's not the question," she said. "Sure it is." "No," Claire said. "James, listen, everybody asks me that, and I've been answering it for 20 years, and I've been answering it wrong." She turned in the chair. "The question isn't whether I'd get on the stage again. Of course I would. That's easy. 2 minutes and a microphone and 500 people, that's easy, sweetheart. Anybody can be brave for 2 minutes." "Then what's the question?" And Claire Morgan said whether I'd say yes to him again in the bar. James went quiet. 6 years, she said. 6 years, James. That's not 2 minutes. That's 2,000 days of getting up and making a decision over and over and over to be a little smaller than I was the day before. Nobody humiliated me on those stairs. He just said it out loud on those stairs. I'd been doing it to myself in that house for 6 years, and nobody needed a camera. Mom. "And here's what nobody wants to hear," she said. "And it's why I've never said it in an interview, and I'm going to say it to you once, and then never again." She held his eyes. "I'd say yes to him again." "What?" "I'd say yes in the bar," Claire said. "Every single time, because I was 24 and he was hungry and brilliant, and he talked to me for 4 hours about a business plan and never once asked what my father did, and that was the truest 4 hours of my whole young life, and I will not lie about it to make a better story." Her chin came up. He was real that night, James. He was real, and I was real, and it was good. And then he built something, and every single thing he built took a little more of the real out of him. And I watched it happen, and I told myself it was pressure. She sat back. So no, I don't regret the bar. I regret the 400 nights after it when I knew. And I said, he's under a lot of stress. James didn't say anything. You want to know if it was worth it? Claire said. Here's your answer. 211,000 women. And I'd trade every one of them, every single one right now today to have not needed it. She was crying, and she didn't bother to stop. That's the truth. That's the actual truth, and nobody ever puts it on the slide. It wasn't worth it. It was just what happened, and I did the only thing you can do with what happens, which is build something out of it so the next one costs somebody less. Her son reached over and took her hand. That's not annoying, James said. No, he said. That's the first answer you've ever given me that wasn't. Claire laughed wetly. I've been working on it for 24 years, she said. She died at 89. The fourth day was in 31 states by then, and the number was over 1 million, and nobody had said the name Whitmore Technologies out loud in 40 years. Nathan had been gone 11 years by then. He'd died in Austin, well-liked at a company he didn't own, and James had gone to the funeral and stood in the back and came home and sat with his mother in silence for 2 hours, and Claire had never asked him one question about it, not one for the rest of her life. At the end, in that same kitchen, James asked her if she wanted anything. And Claire Morgan, 89 years old, said, "Tell them about the stairs." "Mom, everybody knows about the stairs." "No," she said, "not those stairs, the second ones." James leaned in. "He didn't touch me," Claire whispered. "James, listen. At the bottom. He didn't touch me. He stood there with his hands at his sides for the whole 2 minutes, and he had everything. He had one phone call, and he didn't lift a finger because I'd asked him not to." Her eyes were wet and enormous. "And then I said, 'Dad,' and he said, 'I've got you,' and then he put out his hand." "I know, Mom." "Then he waited," Claire said. "That's the whole thing. That's the entire thing. Everybody thinks the story is a billionaire who ended an empire." Her hand tightened on her son's. "It isn't. The story is a man who had all the power in the world and kept his hands at his sides until his daughter asked." She closed her eyes. "That's what a father is," Claire Morgan said. "Not the empire, the waiting." Those were the last words she ever said about any of it, and they were the right ones. Because Nathan Whitmore built a billion-dollar company and lost it in a single evening, and every man in that ballroom went home and told the story wrong for the rest of his life. They said it was the father. They said it was the money. They said a billionaire walked into a room and ended an empire, and they said it because it was easier than the truth, and the truth was sitting on one knee on a staircase at 10:15 at night, 7 months pregnant, asking for a hand. He had one. He had two. He kept them both. And that is the only reason he lost everything.